Welcome to our second episode of Humans in the Loop. So today the topic is AI, the bigger picture, critical questions leaders must ask. And got a co-host here, Daniel. My name's Gareth, co-founder and partner at HYPR. And our special guest today is Martin Kearns, live from New Caledonia.
Hey, Martin.
Yes. It's only because of you two I would while in New Caledonia I would get on a web stream, so it's good to see you.
Thank you. So maybe Daniel, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself, and then Martin, maybe share a little bit of what you've been up to recently in terms of the AI work. A lot of people will probably know you from your strategic consulting and OKR work and Agile lean work, but possibly not so much from the AI governance work you've been doing lately. But first of all, Daniel, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, everyone. So I'm the founder of Great CTO, and that's my coaching and consulting business. And I'm the former CTO for Seek Asia, and do a bunch of work with Gareth and the HYPR team. So excited to be talking with Kearnsy.
Yeah, Kearnsy, tell us a little bit. What have you up to?
So, I think for me, my starting point with AI was I've created a model called better partnering. Better partnering is around how do you kind of start working with a third party when you're not very clear on your requirement. So it was very much aligned to emerging tech and then innovation. So the idea was to create a way that you're really focusing on the partnership rather than the solution, and going through phases of testing, and then knowing when to scale the partnership post pilot, that type of thing, and to make sure that the contracts reflect the level of uncertainty that you're starting with. And funnily enough, AI, with its kind of latest phases and crazes, has given that a real boost, because the way that you engage in partnership is different. And then from there, I've been asked to work with some large clients around how do we govern AI, because it's kind of getting out of control. We're spending a lot of money in it. We're not sure what it's going to give us, and we don't seem to be in control of the spend, because it's the weird thing about AI is the spend isn't necessarily IT. It can be business spend, but it's still somewhat IT related. But it's just that AI is embedded in the product. So I've been working with those type of complexities recently, and I've enjoyed it. Man, it's different. So you really you do have to think about how am I tackling this problem differently, rather than what did I do last time I had a problem and how can I reframe this to the same situation. It just doesn't work that way.
It's probably a pretty good segue into so today we've got sort of four subtopics that we'd like to cover. So strategic investment and business alignment, why organizational resilience and adaptability is important, AI governance, and then ethical considerations. But maybe if we start with strategic investment and business alignment, what are the if we think about business cases for AI, what's different? What do you have to think about differently?
I think for me the beginning starts with you can't look at this through the lens of what you would normally do as a traditional SDLC, and you're kidding yourself if you think you can write a business case up front, because you're basically saying that you're confident that an algorithm is going to align to your situation, when it hasn't even been trained. So you have to start thinking about some form of incremental funding rather than big spend up front. And last week I saw someone present to me their AI program of 4 major phases, and they were calling them projects, and oblivious to the levels of uncertainty. It was just, no, we'll finish on this date. And they even were going down as far as saying, and we have estimates. So if you're going to try and fix price an AI solution up front, best of luck to you, Let me know how it goes. I think it'd be a great case study, because it's, from my understanding, even if you're taking the most common out of the box AWS chatbot solution, the degree of customization and training required, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Probably it could be, but then the other thing about AI is that it's not like a build run scenario where we build it and deliver it. Like the concepts like drift, hallucinations of an algorithm require ongoing maintenance. Now, if the monitoring and maintenance and ethics associated with these things is something that you're also outsourcing, you're actually taking on a fair amount of risk if something goes wrong. So I think even just the nature of how you maintain an AI solution and how you're constantly in fear of drift, or because remember, AI or generative AI doesn't have a consciousness, so it's just going to make decisions based on the patterns it's found, and they might be the right ones, and it could get you in a lot of trouble. And that's one of the things that I'm concerned about, is that we're not really thinking about what comes once you've proven a saving. And even if you achieved a saving, I haven't met a leader yet who says, you know what, as a result of AI, I'm going to drop my budget by 30%. The budget seems to always want to be at least the same. So I don't think, if we're going to say that AI is going to save lots of money, it may create space for greater innovation, might create space and time to do more things. But I don't see any CTO, CIO, or anyone really saying, yeah, in my business case, I'm going to drop my operational costs by 30%.
It's more likely to be reallocated.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And even that reallocation is going to deteriorate over time. And I feel that's my biggest worry, is that I just think the ongoing maintenance and monitoring is not necessarily there. And then the other thing, I mean, the scenario I played out to somebody and they couldn't answer, I said, okay, you have you're a retailer, you have an online store, you want to increase your shopping baskets by 20% using recommenders. What happened if those recommenders led to addiction and a greater spend between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m. and it's proven that your website now is a form of addiction? Is that something you're going to be proud of? Are we thinking about where the spend is and what's considered health and not? And I think if you want to think about these things in a greater depth, just look at how gambling has evolved and the level of regulatory requirement on those, and to manage addiction. You're not far off it with shopping baskets and impulse purchases because of a click. And there's going to be a point in time where we're going to have, I think, a similar problem than we had with gambling.
Mm-hmm. And so with the newness of some of the AI technologies and some of the issues that you've raised, you mentioned the level of uncertainty is higher. So what are some of the things that leaders can do to address or manage the uncertainty?
So for me, the most important one is to incubate your test, your pilot, whatever you want to call it, into very much like an accelerated innovation hub, and make sure you have your best people in there. Because if it's, you're going to need Johnny, but Johnny's really busy on other things, we can give you 2 hours in a couple of weeks. Or you need to talk to a leader who his calendar's full, so busy, I'll see you in 3 weeks. Well, you're just wasting your time, because this is an accelerated learning loop. And guess what? To have an accelerated learning loop, you need to have instant feedback. And to have feedback, you have to space in your calendar to say this is important. So I think that's the starting point, is how are you incubating your tests so that they can have their best chance and they don't fall into the regular cadence of your calendar, because then nothing changes. It's just another project. That's the starting point for me. The other thing, and the one that I'm probably most surprised by, is how poorly businesses can set a hypothesis. I'm finding people who are project managers in this space, they want everything to be green. Like I was doing a series of AI tests with a client, and oh man, it's been a rough ride. And they had a steering committee on it, and every single test was green. And I even said to them, like, maybe you need to come up with different color greens, because to say that these are all have been great is a bit of a misrepresentation of the reality, because it's been a rough ride. They're all going to finish, but man, you might need different shades of green for the level of pain that we went through in each one. And that, and it's stuff like that. And the other aspect of it is that I just don't think the DNA of organizations celebrates red, right?
Yeah.
If you're really going to believe in AI, there's things like false positives that you have to embrace. A failed experiment is a positive, because you have enough experience and knowledge to say something's failed, which means second time round you might get a better chance of getting it right. And I just think that in inertia to call something red or a fail is a problem. And the other part of it again then is that you're going to have to pay a third party if you're using them when they fail, because it's an advantageous learning to you, right? And rather than it must go live, so there's all of these kind of logics, I think, challenge the norms of business and the usual questions that are like to be asked to kind of govern by.
It's interesting, just some of the concepts you bring in there are quite familiar, I think, for people that have worked with Agile and Lean constructs, the fast feedback loops and the psychological safety, and kind of, creating that culture of innovation where, if you are failing, you're failing fast and learning from it. Are you finding, like, you've obviously got a lot of history in that space, so this is a pretty natural sort of, applying those kind of ideas with AI is a fairly natural kind of fit?
I think for me, the nature of feedback as an agilist and managing my ego when I fail is something which definitely helps me. But there is the first principles of agility, which is around working with complex problems, which, guess what this is helpful. But I still think when you look at how organizations treat Agile, it's still to deliver successful projects each time. It just might be a rough ride. Sometimes with AI, the outcome should be a fail, and especially during pilot. However, it may become something else afterwards. So I think, my ability to kind of manage my own personal ego when working in this space has definitely been helped from my past attempts with Agile, from transforming a company to trying to deliver a failed project. You do have some level of humility to feedback. I just think with more with the Gen AI than the AI itself, I just think it's just another level. And even I get tired with it, because it's a pace that's different. But at the same time, if you don't have controls and parameters in place, there's a risk of drifting on your budget, which is which is usually our justification. So I think the one thing that Agile has given me is the idea of, it's not necessarily just MVP, but at least I always talk about Alistair Coburn's pay to learn. And for me, a pay to learn has to be a maximum of 3% of your budget, because if it fails, you have 97% left to do something with it. So for me, the pay to learn phase is probably the thing that Agile has given me the most, and to just be really sensitive and conscious to spend from a percentage perspective, because usually after 10%, nobody believes pay to learn is a good thing. So I find that probably the best discipline that Agile's given me.
You mentioned earlier, Martin, that there are some things that you almost have to unlearn because a lot of things are different. So you can't just take everything as you used to do it. Do you want to expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, AI and Gen AI solutions aren't achieved through deterministic methods like upfront analysis, upfront planning, agreements and scope. What is the requirement? These are the types of things that are unhelpful to get the best out of an AI investment. You know, the spending 6 weeks trying to make it perfect to start means 6 weeks of waste, because, you know, usually with an AI, you're not building your own algorithm, you're actually buying it and then you're just training it. You should be doing that within the first week, and your first user test needs to be in the second, right? And I've seen a lot of people spending a lot of time up front with their data cleansing and their data management and getting everybody's aligned and agreed to what we're going to do and how we're going to do it and who do we need and have we got our team ready, all that type of stuff. And I just think, you know, this stuff, you know, you need to allow it, you know, kind of smack you awake. You know, its evolutions can happen in hours, not necessarily even days. And until you're in that type of incubated mindset of let's evolve this as fast as we can with all, you know, with the permission to do so and the autonomy to make decisions, it just doesn't work. So I think the desire to try and take uncertainty out through discussion up front by, you know, setting a risk and then saying let's keep an eye on it, it just doesn't work that way. It's it's the most empirical method of delivery I've ever come across, and it's only through experiment and experience will you ever actually get better. So the sooner you can get to that, you know, the best for everyone. And I just think it's so different to those who have desire for plans and desire to remove uncertainty through discussion or through analytics.
I've got a couple of examples from my time at Experian and at Seek, which were two very data-driven businesses. But you know, even those businesses experienced in that domain of data and AI could fall into the trap of having one team work on, you know, all this data preparation for 12 months that was going to be consumed by some AI models, which was worked on a separate team separately with the assumption that it'll all come together beautifully in the end, and often realizing that all the data that you'd collected was in the wrong form and missing things that you needed to collect, and finding that out 12 months late. So what you're saying really resonates. And that definitely drove us much more towards sort of outcomes thinking and measurement and finding ways to, you know, test the learning early.
You know, I would say that for every successful AI solution, there's a bunch of failed hypotheses inside of it. And how quickly have we identified those and remedied them? And I think, you know, the one thing I love about OKRs in this space is that I think when you use exploratory or hypothesis-based objectives and they're early milestones rather than the final outcome, I think, you know, it gives you a better chance. So you might have an OKR annual objective, which is cost reduction, but there should be a bunch of hypotheses and I suppose based on key results and exploratory objectives, you know, in that first half of the year, and there are a set of milestones that you pivot from. And so I think, I just think to design these things.
Yeah, can you maybe just talk us through some examples of that? So I think the concept there is that, you know, you might have an objective around, say, a new AI product, which is getting to fresh revenue, and creating a new business line out of it. But the steps along the way might be, getting to your first paid customer,
Sure.
for example.
Yeah, so let's go with the easiest one, which is chatbots are going to help us to reduce call times and mean that we can serve our customer growth with the same headcount that we have. We're not going to have to, grow our customer care team at the speed of our growth. It can be actually kind of at least a bit of a ceiling on it for a while. Well,
yep.
First things first, we have to make sure that we have the knowledge documents IP to pump into the algorithm for a chatbot to even work. So there's an assumption there. We have all of this data. We just have, and then it's where is it and how do we find it? And sure, the smarts of AI are going to cleanse, duplication, etc., or versioning. Well, first thing first would be, well, how long are we going to spend trying to get that right before we then do something? And it's a never-ending story if we want to use an agile perspective around how much IP is enough, right? It's never enough. Just whatever you have, just keep pumping it in. So a good idea of an OKR is to have an exploratory OKR, which is a set time to say we're going to spend 5 weeks finding the IP that's required to make an algorithm viable. And even if we make it viable, like who's it for? Are we going to make a chatbot that's customer facing, or is it user facing? If it's user facing, one of the first things you can do is you can create a pilot team and assess their willingness to keep using it. Right? Because for me, usage is an important metric. And usually with these type of scenarios, that usage is high at the start. People get bored when they find out it's a lot of hard work. I have to give feedback when it fails to fix it. Yeah, and it drifts down to a usage rate that doesn't make sense. In the same way as when have you got the consistency in the answers that it is possible to be customer facing, and are our customers going to engage with it? Now I still remember Lonely Planet, they did a presentation a long time ago where they were basically trying to create an iPhone app that looks and acts similar to the books, and nobody bought it, even though they put millions into it. So and they just hadn't tested even a beta version to see actually who's interested in it. And guess what? A lot of people, when they travel, they still like the book just because it's tangible. It's a bit different, might be different now because data is so cheap. But when they started off, it wasn't, and it was a couple of $1 million wasted on something that was making less than $100 a day. Like the way in which the presentation goes, the person gives $2 coins to 5 people and says, "Can you buy the app?" And as a result, we've made more this today than we did yesterday. That was I'll never forget it. Right, so his name is Nigel Dalton, another Kiwi. So it was. My point is that when you're working in these type of uncertainties, these different techniques inside of the OKR framework force you to have milestones and force you to have feedback and, I suppose, harder conversations.
Yeah, no, that's great example. And I think again, leveraging some techniques like continuous discovery, but it's amplified because of the speed at which things are changing, whether it's the technology or the market's response to it. The milestone approach makes a whole lot of sense. So maybe sorry.
There wasn't, so there's something else on that. Like if you're thinking about these solutions, the life cycle of AI has stages, but the algorithm goes through those life cycles a load of times. So each version is basically another. So there's ongoing discovery, but you still have to try and get something coherent and testable with a user. So at what point in time do you save that for version 2, right? Or version 3? You know, how fast are we getting through these? Probably means, you know, it's a different kind of mindset that you have to the risk that you're taking with live tests, right? There's all of these type of things, and you know, even an A/B test can give you some level of kind of comfort as to how slow you're going in your evolutions.
Yeah. I guess that's sort of speaks a little bit to that AI governance, and with AI based products, even when you get to that first, you've found a product which is viable, feasible, desirable, you've got it out there. It's not just the market that's changing, it's actually the technology is rapidly potentially changing as well. So how does that impact governance?
Okay, well, from what I know, there's still not an endless supply of money in the world, and I don't think there's endless budgets to this new phase or craze or whatever, or trend, whatever you want to give it a name to. So at some point in time, you have to compare investments against one another, and you know, if you have a set amount that you're willing to invest in this space, well, comparison and contrast of one to another is what's going to make this happen. When do you allow an algorithm to depreciate or even just stop because it's not returning what it promised it would, and we're into our second year, compared to a new product that has been released that looks attractive? So the governance is like portfolio style governance around where best to spend our money, where's the best probability of return, and how do we attest the viability or the probability of success. That's what you're doing. But if you're saying, hey, we're just going to spend every dollar we have in this space because it's cool, which there's a risk, because remember, you can invest in AI outside of IT, and you can find yourself in a lot of trouble and wasting a lot of money. And I always worry why we never really learn from our mistakes in the past. We had a .com flop. Now, online became a big thing after the .com flop, so we learned the hard way. I really hope we don't have to learn the hard way with AI and Gen AI, because I don't think there needs to be a flop. We should have gotten better from our past mistakes. However, I am worried that I'm seeing them being repeated.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is the sort of theme of the product life cycle appears to be getting more and more compressed, and AI is a factor in that, right? So just the necessity for discovery up front, but also if you kind of fast forward it, like the way you're talking about the governance, products may not last as long, and so decommissioning and moving on to the next one and having that capability within organizations, I think that becomes a key part of governance, right?
Yeah, I mean, products will not last as long, especially if it's in an AI space. It just won't. And the other thing is that every product out there is trying to create AI features, right? So when do you lose the identity of the product? Because you've pumped features into so its original value proposition is getting lost. So that there is going to be higher levels of competition. There is going to be faster depreciation of asset because of what competition is doing in these spaces, and we don't know where we're going to be in 3 years in this space, and who knows what's coming next? Is it from a startup, or is it from one of the big four in this space? Who knows? But the other thing is that AI and Gen AI have been around a long time, right? I did my first AI solution you could argue it's machine learning, which is a form of AI, but we'll not get into the pedantics of it. 20 years ago, it was a rule-based engine to look at phone usage and identify churn. Now that took a huge amount of power. We could only ever run it at night, and then we just gave a list to customer care to kind of make calls, and they were very surprised with how grateful people were and how right the people to call was, because they were ready to leave. Now, there's smarter ways to do what was being done, and from there. But like, it's not new. You know, my brother, like, LLMs have been around a long time. What's changed is that they're more coherent, and the price of computing has dropped, and the price of storage is probably, cloud is probably the thing that made this work the most. So they've been around a while. It's just that they're evolving faster. And my point is that in 3 years' time, how much further would they've evolved? And yeah, you know, I'm sure there'll be at some point in time a disaster that'll make the press, and then we might be also as excited when boards are putting in huge amounts of regulatory requirement on top of AI generated solutions. And that's probably something that will happen at some stage, which would maybe slow it down, for good reason if we're not careful.
Yeah, I think that pace of change, I guess, sort of leads into some of the ethical concerns as well, right? In terms of impact on workforce, and there's a constant debate. There's a lot of hype, and usually it's from people that have potentially something to benefit from the AI replacing workforce. But
it's really getting on my nerves now, and especially on LinkedIn. And the fear mongering is really getting up my nose. Like, there was a post the other day where basically the guy was saying half the white collar workers are going to be redundant. There was a photograph of guys in suits feeling sorry for themselves on the edge of a road. And really, would we as a population do that? Because here's the thing: if we made half the workforce redundant, they won't have disposable income to spend, which will make the other half of services redundant fairly quickly, right? And that would probably create a Great Depression. Now, if that's what we're wanting to do with AI, is to destroy our economy, well,
I think
why would we?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, when you look at the opportunity, I mean, especially say in software product engineering, you look at all of the things that could be done better. Which with AI now, it's in the realms of possibility that some of these things like improved documentation, etc., can be that can free up people to do more valuable work. So there's so many things we don't do at the moment in terms of the maturity of product engineering that could be improved, right?
That's right. I mean, if I would love AI to make refactoring to be like a chimney sweep, right? It's where the refactoring is just something that happens in the background that you don't even have to pay attention to, and the concept of technical debt and backlogs is lost, right?
Yeah.
Now, I would love to think that would create innovation, creativity, and hope, and that's where I'd want to see it go. Not okay. Let's reduce our investment.
That's right. I mean, when you think of technical debt, this is a problem that's been around for decades, and whilst we've got some better solutions to it, it's not managed well by, there's virtually no organizations that manage it well. In fact, latest data from over 8,000 global value streams is that 65% of organizations spend less than 10% of their capacity on technical debt. So they're essentially accumulating debt all the time. So it's a great example, right? There's plenty of areas to focus on that helps humans focus on more value.
Yeah. So, I do think we do have to ask ourselves where we try to compete and take advantage of technology and opportunity, that we don't fall into the level of regulatory requirement that now is on top of the gambling industry. If you look at how that's kind of gone wrong, it's only a couple of years before any form of advertisement is going to be banned on TV and media. They've had to create solutions where there's ceilings to how much people are able to spend against their affordable income. Like I'm not saying it's going to be the exact same, but there is, with these type of things, when we try to take advantage, we push boundaries, and eventually that creates regulatory requirements. So I think we could be regulated fairly heavily in this space after a few failed mistakes that make it to the press. and are now going to start influence how people vote. Which, there's it happens all the time. It's the reason why there's departments called cybersecurity. Like there's with every evolution in technology, there's risk that comes with it, and the problem with Gen AI in particular is there's ethical risk because it doesn't have consciousness, and we're allowing it to engage directly with our customer through content.
So we might see the rise of the chief AI officer and a regulatory governance-based role within organizations.
Could be. Wouldn't be the first time.
Or maybe it goes into the responsibilities of the CISO, or it'd be interesting to see how it plays out.
But look at us now, right? And thanks to data, the chief data officer role is now something that's around, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And one of the main reasons that what they have to do is to secure data, because of the amount of data breaches there has been. I think we just have to remember that AI is going to evolve, and some of these ways in which previous evolutions, because I think the breakthrough in data when we broke away from a two-dimensional data table have changed the world really, and I just think we're going to see something very similar over time in this space. We can be resilient to it, and we can expect it rather than get surprised and see this as an overhead and cost.
Yeah. And what about sorry, Daniel, you go.
Yeah, I was just following that thread, Martin. You mentioned some of the opportunities in terms of creativity, improving resilience of systems, making more time for better practices and things like that. So how should technologists be approaching AI?
Fall in love with it and make it become the better version of you. I would say AI has improved my productivity at least 100%. I don't spend as much time on PowerPoint, although I do produce PowerPoints. I just use different tools to do so. I have a way of validating my views that I hadn't got before, and I now basically validate my views with peers after I've kind of validated with my own individual GPTs, which I'm starting to really like. So if you learn to see these things as a third arm, you'll get a chance to do all those things that you've always complained you just don't have time for. And I think that's the only way to look at this stuff, really.
Yeah, it's a great view, and certainly something I've experienced as well. So maybe Daniel, shall we do a little bit of a wrap up in terms of where all of the things we covered?
We've covered a lot of ground. So some of the things that resonated with me. So the first early comment that you made, Martin, about how you can't take all our assumptions about how we were working previously and take that into AI. So we have to be looking for, yes, some things may be the same, but some things shift quite dramatically because of the newness and what is changing. So that one stuck with me. In terms of some of the ethical and risk considerations, I think there was some interesting threads there. There's so many, yes, they may have been considered by maybe some think tanks, but within your organizational context, have you considered the ramifications of, how AI is interacting with your customers, some of the ethical concerns that Martin raised. So that was the second thread. The third thread, and I've got a post here that I wrote on the Hyper Innovation blog. So Kearns spoke a lot about shifting the way we think about funding And so I've talked about funding envelopes and, decision-based funding and all those different modes, which I think it's a great point that Kearns was making. Those are the pillars. What stood out for you, Gareth?
I think, that sort of the compressed nature of the product life cycle and how it impacts across the entire life cycle from discovery through to governance. It's sort of it's almost an amplification of what we've seen over the last 20 years, but even more sort of profound in its impact potentially. And then I think the governance and ethical side of things, I think at the moment everybody's kind of very focused on the opportunities, but as you're saying, Kenzie, once someone along the way, an organization is going to make a mistake, and then there'll potentially be a few big stories of where governance or ethical considerations weren't applied, and that could be the point where that becomes a bit more prevalent. But I think that's maybe a little bit of a blind spot for people and organizations at the moment, and something that could potentially change. And the nature of AI in an organization, how that's just the trend of data, and then thinking about that in terms of AI and what that means for roles and focus and change of workforce.
I'm reading a really interesting book at the moment, called Radical Uncertainty, and one of the authors of his name is John Kay, which I think you and I both have a bit of a fan of. And one of the things that they spoke about, that when analysts were asked, the chances of the GFC happening was 0.0000, and it was a lot of zeros, 0.3, or it's like so 000. I think it was like 20 of them, and then 3, right? So, and it still happened. And his point was that when we are trying to be rational in creating probabilities, it's based off assumed knowledge. Whereas what happened was something we never assumed, but now we would never forget. And he says there's going to be a lot more of those. And I think if you take that, there's a radical uncertainty to AI development, and Gen AI in particular, that we need to start thinking about differently, and a rational mindset is not the way to go about it. And
no.
I think a curious one, or one that believes in empirical evidence, will be probably better. And I think that's where we need to look at it. There's a radical uncertainty in this space, which shouldn't be then retrofitted in. So here's the thing that worries me. Like, we go, so we got into a bit of a craze that, project to product is a good thing. I think it is, right? If we reframe AI to a product lifecycle, a product mindset, are we just using confirmation bias around a good move should be the only move? Right? And that would be one of the things I'd have, is that I just don't see this is applicable to a product lifecycle, when you want to do it right. However, that's not saying product lifecycles aren't a bad thing, because I think that was a major move forward from a project mindset.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that's coming up through the executives that I'm speaking with, so they're seeing their teams approaching implementation of AI through product mindset, but missing that a lot of these are actual information problems to be addressed. So it's more about knowing what situation you're in and then applying the appropriate model. So I think that's a great point. And the other thread that you had there, Martin, was around the use of OKRs and other ways to understand progress. Might be your KPIs, might be your risk framework, but there's leaning on those and actually, using those to form your pivot point decisions was another key call out.
Yeah, I think remember, think about a KPI is that you have a non-metric that has some correlation to what you're aiming for. So I think we should monitor through KPI, but I think in the early stages, an OKR is a better fit. So for me, you evolve to a KPI as you're more coherent in the levers that you need to assess by, right? And then I think there are going to be new ones that we've never thought of.
Yeah, it's very change oriented, which is more the OKR space, isn't it? But yeah, I love the milestone approach. Yep. Cool. I think that is probably a wrap for us today. So thank you so much, Kenzie, and I hope your son goes very well and you enjoy the rest of your time in New Caledonia. And love to have you back and do another one of these very soon.
No worries, man. It's good.
Thanks, Kenzie. Yeah,
Cheers,
awesome.
mate.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, mate. Bye.